What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show on this lovely Wednesday afternoon. I am your host, Josh Harris.
I thought you were going to forget your name there first.
Oh, I was getting an emergency call. I was like, I did not do that. But here's the thing. I love the NHL, but I have a bone to pick with the NHL. What is the scheduling? What are we doing here, right? You want to open the season with the Stanley Cup champs, right? I get that. You have your ceremony. Why start it with an afternoon game in Seattle? Start it with the Panthers. Then you have like an 8:30 p.m. start. You can do it in Seattle, have a little matinee, grab a little espresso, go watch some hockey, go grab some dinner. No, 1:30 p.m. Pacific, playing some hockey as the first game of the season. It's just a mess, man. The NHL scheduling is worse than DK contest sizing, but we don't have time for that. What's going on, Cliffy?
Not a whole lot. Yeah, I'm scheduling thoughts. I don't seem to be as upset about it as you are, I guess. I mean, I don't have a problem with the afternoon game. I would probably just make it two more, let's call it interesting teams than Seattle and St. Louis. Like St. Louis probably going to finish in the bottom 10 of the league this year, and Seattle's probably might be there too. Like it's not one that'll grab the attention, let's say, but good night of games last night. I should say at least I shouldn't say that because Florida kind of beat the piss out of Boston. Boston got a couple late goals, so the score looked a little bit closer, but like Florida was running all over them through the first half of that game.
Oh, yeah. Well, Corpus-Sal sucks. Like you come out of Ottawa and,
I mean, everybody made the joke that if Swayman waits like 4 days to sign his contract, he's probably making $10 million a season instead of $8. Like maybe. I think another thing that game hammered home is like Swayman's not making like 47 starts this year. You know what I mean? Like they're not giving Corpus-Sal 35 starts. Seems pretty safe to say like Swayman's going to set a career high as long as he stays healthy. St. Louis, Seattle, you and I were talking about it a little bit in chat in our DM in Discord this morning. I knew I was cooked yesterday for DFS. I went single entry. I had a two-man of Shane Wright and Oliver Bjorkstrand. And they're on a line with Eeli Tolvanen. Eeli Tolvanen, you're a hat trick pick, by the way. So at least you got one goal out of him. Eeli Tolvanen scores and the 2 assists go to the defenseman. Like 5 guys on the ice and the 2 of them are in my lineup and neither of them got in on the goal. It was the other 3. Like I knew I was cooked at that point. Had a Arizona power play stack late. Did well enough. But between Grubauer, Grubauer didn't look terrible. But he certainly didn't play well enough to be like they should have won that game because of Grubauer or anything like that. Like Seattle was the better team, but Grubauer let in a super soft goal to Broberg, and that just kind of broke the team's back. Florida was all over Boston the first half of the game, built up a big enough lead where any late comeback didn't really matter. Utah-Chicago was interesting. Josh, I know this is going to surprise you, but Ilya Mikheyev was kicked off the top line after the first period of the first game of the season.
Pretends to be shocked.
Yeah, it's like, how did you think that one was going to go, boys? I think Utah certainly looked really good. I'm still not completely sold on some of their forwards. I do think they really need Nick Bukestad back. I think he really rounds out that top 9. Mikhail Sergachev looked great. I think that's the one, Dylan Guenther got the 2 goals. Clayton Keller got on the score sheet. All that's nice. Connor Ingram had a good game. What stood out to me was like Mikhail Sergachev looked like a bona fide true number 1 NHL defenseman in that game. Now it's just one game and it's just Chicago, who honestly might be back in the lottery again this year. But I think that's what I took most from the late game was that Sergachev looked tremendous. He didn't do a whole lot for DFS. But I have a feeling that he's going to pay off DFS owners quite often this year. So, Utah, I think they're a force to be reckoned with.
To what 2 Utes. No, but I think it was Sergachev and Dursey. They had like a 73% expected goal share when they were on the ice together last night. It is Chicago. They're an embarrassment of a team, but it's still good. If Utah has a top pair, that's going to be very, very good for them. Speaking of goalies getting extensions because their counterparts sucked, Seattle signed Decord to an extension after the game. Grubauer is going to be waiting tables in the mountains of Uzbekistan.
I had another article to write at a different site, and I said, like, contract negotiations like this are weeks, if not months, in the making. It is just absolutely hilarious that less than 24 hours that Grubauer basically loses that game for Seattle. They give Joey Decord, who has 1 season in the NHL, 5 years and $25 million. It's like, starting Grubauer is like putting McKay up on the first line. Like, how did you expect this to go? It went about as we thought it would.
Yeah. Before we get into tonight's slate, we have a nice 5-gamer with some serious firepower. We have Matthews, McKinnon, Eichel, McDavid, Vancouver. A lot of firepower on this slate. Today is the last day to get 5 days for $1. You get full premium access. You get the lineup projections. Skater projections, player ownership, top stacks tools, Data Central, which is everything in one spot, and you get access to the premium Discord, which is invaluable because Daily Deposit Frostback is in there, and he will tell you his goalie picks, and you run for your life if you have the same guys. He missed lock last night because he said he was working. I declare shenanigans on that statement, but he came in a couple minutes after lock, and he's like, yeah, I'm on Grubauer and Bob. Grubauer gave up 3 goals in the minute 55. Bob gave up 3 goals in the last 2 minutes of that game. Coincidence? I don't believe in it. So, Daily Deposit Frostbacks, goalie picks, fades, or whatever you want to call them, very important in the Discord. But 5 days for $1. You can do weekly, you can do monthly. It renews after the 5 days. But, big contest now before NBA is starting. Then they'll go back to probably status quo, what they were for the past few seasons. But, yeah. Hop in, click that link in the chat. It is our affiliate link, and it supports us directly, helps us bring you all this free content. Bobby Boom in the chat. I was wondering when your pinned pupils were going to pop in, but here you are. What do you think of this slate, by the way? Lots of firepower. Hopefully some spread out ownership because pricing is SAWFT soft.
Yeah, it's an interesting slate because, Chicago, Utah, not last night, not really a big rivalry. Seattle, St. Louis, certainly not a rivalry. I look at this slate, basically rivalries across the board. Toronto, Montreal, obviously. Rangers, Pittsburgh, obviously. Colorado, Vegas, obviously. Like Winnipeg, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, not necessarily huge rivals based on recent history, but anytime you get 2 Canadian teams facing off against each other, like it's going to get a little bit spicy. So I do like that we have a bunch of rivalries on the board. We have most of the information as well, which is always nice. I think there are like 1 or 2 game time decisions that we'll talk about later. But other than that, like it seems like pretty clear sailing. Yeah, you talk about the soft pricing. Like Edmonton's top line, the McDavid, Hyman, Nugent, Hopkins line, we were talking before the show. There are times last season when that line was over 25K, like for weeks on end. And today they're coming in at 22,200 on DraftKings. Like it is soft pricing. That's just the way it is. But I think one thing that does, as long as it's soft pricing across the board, it does help spread out ownership a little bit. Makes a lot of different lines viable. So I do, especially if you're playing a lot of lineups in a big tournament like the big $5 in DK today. So I don't mind the soft pricing that much. I will appreciate it once McDavid gets to the point where you actually have to make a decision of how much of him you want to play in your lineups. But yeah, really nice slate up ahead. Excited for the games.
Yeah, and right before we get into it, I would be remiss if we did not shout out our boy Quick Party. Don't want to dox him like we did last year with his full name. But if you do like the line matching stuff that we reference, he does have it up on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/line matching. He has monthly. I'm not sure if he has weekly. He has some kind of, I think he has monthly and yearly, but patreon.com/line matching, @line matching on the twitter.com machine. Check him out. He has some really good stuff. We both use it. It is a great compliment to the Stochastic membership, which you can get for $1. Expires tonight. Click that link in the chat, and we'll go from there. Let's get into the first game of the night. Probably some bad blood already. Toronto Maple Leafs with a 3.7 total heading into Montreal. The Canadiens have a 2.8. Joseph Woll out tonight with the lower body injury, so it's going to be New Jersey's own Anthony Stolarz between the pipes for the Leafs tonight. Looks like Montembeault for the Canadiens. It was the Leafs who took Line A out, knee on knee. I don't know if they think it was intentional. It was a kid, right? It wasn't someone who's on the roster now, was it?
Yeah, no, it was. I think his name's Marshall Refi. He's in the AHL, so like it's. Yeah. Other than this being like a typical Montreal Toronto game that does just get can get kind of hectic on their own. I'm not expecting any particular fireworks, but Arbor Jack guy is in the lineup. Just about anything can happen.
Yeah, hopefully he power bombs Mitch Marner, and we can go from there. Looking at ownership, though, this is one of the games that has very high ownership, and it's on a particular line and not the one that I was expecting. I was kind of expecting Matthews, Marner, Nyes to have really heavy ownership, but it is actually Nylander, Tavares, Domi. And the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. That line is all gas, no brakes. That is all offense, no defense, and they're going to get, they're going to avoid the Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky line for the most part. Now, last year, once you got past that line, it was an absolute mess. I don't suspect it's going to be much better this year. That being said, Kirby Dach is in the lineup. He does look bigger. He is trying to be more physical. I think him being on that second line is certainly going to help. I don't know how much it's going to help defensively to the point where you don't really want to stack against Kirby Dach, Joel Armia, and Alex Newhook. But I think it will be a little bit more stabilizing than just auto stacking against Montreal too. That being said, Toronto 2 coming in at almost 30% projected ownership. Now, if you know me, outside of the centers, I am higher on William Nylander than Mitch Marner for DFS, just because Mitch Marner is a goal scorer. Let's take it easy. Nylander is a goal scorer. Mitch Marner is more of a facilitator. He goes through stretches where he doesn't want to shoot the puck for whatever reason. When Marner does shoot the puck, he is very, very good for DFS. This still is a very good power play spot. I think this is a spot where you can power play stack. Now, that is a way to get a little bit different in a high ownership game. You know what I mean? You could do like Matthews, Marner, Nylander, something like that. It gets expensive, but again, pricing is pretty soft across the board. Toronto's an obvious play here. I think Montreal 1 is a bit more interesting. They're 16,900. They're coming in with positive leverage, 8.6% projected ownership. The Leafs tried to address the blue line in the offseason. I don't know if they did a great job of addressing it defensively. Their penalty kill's still probably going to be a mess. Their bottom 6 doesn't look great defensively. The one thing that I do worry about, right, because Matthews didn't really there was times where a good stretch of the season where Marner was playing with Tavares and it was like Matthews, Nylander, Domi, and that line isn't great defensively, but Matthews and Marner have a long, long track record of being very good defensively. That's the one thing that gives me a bit of trepidation on Montreal 1, especially with the Rangers Trocheck line at the exact same price. So I do like Montreal 1. I just worry that the matchup isn't great. It is a 5-game slate. I absolutely wouldn't X them out, especially if I'm MMEing, but that does give me pause in single entry. Montreal 2 is interesting. They're coming in with a ton of negative leverage, and they're so cheap to the point where you don't really need them. But I think a one-off Kirby Dach is fine because Tavares, Nylander, Domi, not going to be very good defensively.
Yeah. I'll start on the Toronto side. Like, Toronto won at 19,200 feels too cheap. We said there was soft pricing, but Mitch Marner at 5,900, when he's at his best, he'll be priced in the 7 to 8K range, right? So he's obviously, Matthews is 9,800. Matthews is priced just fine. But Marner 5,900 in a month, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he was 7,900. You know what I mean?
Contract year for Marner too. So
yeah, and Matthew Nyes at $3,500 is also pretty interesting. Like, he had 15 goals last year as a rookie, playing like 13 minutes a game. And playing on a Tavares Nylander line, like we'll talk about them in a second. Tavares and Nylander for a couple years now have struggled to score, and Nyes still put up 15 goals on a line that I don't mean struggles to score for their talent or struggles to score for, being on Toronto. I just mean like being an average second line. And when you think of Tavares and Nylander being an average scoring second line, it's just crazy. But Nyes on the top line, like, he's a player that I'm very, very high on. I think he's exactly the type of guy that top line needs. Like, remember a few years ago when Michael Bunting had like 62 points or something like that? Like, I think Nyes can have that kind of season. Maybe not 62, but like 52. I think that's certainly in play. I think that's another guy where if he's playing up to his potential on that top line, even without the power play minutes, he'll be $1,000 more expensive than he is now. Toronto 1 just seems far too cheap to me. And, they are one of the top stacks on the night. 22.7% top 2 stack percentage, 16% ownership. They get a ton of minutes is the other thing. Like, they do have a new coach in Craig Berube. We'll see what he does. He's not Sheldon Keefe. But Marner and Matthews should both be over 20 minutes, maybe over 21 to 22 minutes, depending on how the game goes. So they get a ton of ice time. I'm not that worried about the matchup against Montreal 1. Like, Montreal 1, the revelation on that side of things was that they became a really good offensive line, not a really good defensive one. About league average, maybe even worse defensively. I'm not concerned about any of the defensive matchups, like Cole Hudson playing on the second pair with David Savard is not going to be great defensively. Mike Matheson and Caden Gooley are not going to be great defensively. I think Gooley's good defensively on his own. I don't think Matheson's going to do him any favors. So, like, I really do like Toronto 1 here. They're under 20K. They are, as I said, one of the top 2 stacks on the night. Like, they're not quite Edmonton, Colorado level, but they're just behind that. I really do like Toronto 1 here. Toronto 2, I think, is fine. Here, my issue is like, I honestly think that second line with Armia, Newhook, and Dach is going to be better defensively than their top line. I genuinely believe that. They'll be a lot worse offensively, but I think they'll be better defensively. Dach is good defensively. Armia is good defensively. Newhook, it can be hit or miss. But Tavares is aging, had a shooting percentage drop last season. He needs that to rebound. Whether it does at his age is an open question. I think Max Domi pretty much had a career year last year. Like, it wasn't a career year by points, but he played extremely well, especially over the final 2 months of the season. When they had some injuries that they were dealing with, and he filled in the top 6, and he got a good contract out of that. And he's terrible defensively. Like, he's a great playmaker, and he's terrible defensively. And that line is bad defensively as it is. I'm not in so much on Toronto 2. For me, it's Toronto 1. Toronto 3 is honestly kind of interesting because that Montreal bottom 6 sucks. They are going to get destroyed. Josh Anderson on the third line, like, that guy, if he was making $1.5 million a season instead of $5.5 million a season, he would be in the AHL or bought out by now. Alex Barré-Boulet, when Tampa Bay is in a cap crunch and they can sign you for $775,000, even Tampa Bay's like, no, you guys can have him. that should probably tell you something about the quality of the player that's coming in. He's a decent playmaker. That's about it that there is to his game. I think that Montreal bottom six can get run over. Nick Robertson looked great for Toronto in the preseason. Max Pacioretty doesn't look like the guy 5 years ago, but if he's 80% of that, he's still pretty good. Pontus Holmberg, I think, is kind of underrated. Like Toronto 3 is one of those lines where I could take like Robertson and Pacioretty and throw them in an Edmonton top line stack or a Colorado top line stack or something like that. I think they're going to come in over-owned, relatively speaking, but I do think Toronto 3 is in play. But Toronto 1 is what I love the best on that side. On the Montreal side, like for me, it's top line or bust is kind of the way that I'm looking at it. On the second line, like I would take an Alex Newhook one-off. I would take a Joel Armia one-off. Like Armia, he plays second line. He'll play second line power play, get second line minutes, even strength. He'll play on the penalty kill. Like he'll get minutes and he can put up 2 to 3 shots a game, 2 to 2.5 more likely. So I don't mind him as one-off or Newhook as a one-off or something like that. I wouldn't stack them. I wouldn't stack anything in the Montreal bottom six. For me, if I'm playing the Habs, it's top line or bust. They'll get a lot of minutes as well. Like all 3 guys might be over 20 minutes, depending how the game goes. Certainly Nick Suzuki will, and Caulfield will probably push that, if not exceed it. So I do like both. I hate to say it, I do like both top lines the best in this game. I really don't like the depth all that much. If I was to play a depth line, it would honestly probably be Toronto 3 if I was making like an Edmonton power play stack or a Colorado power play stack or something like that.
Yeah, and Toronto 2's ownership's a tad lofty, but Craig Berube being the coach, if you're worried about minutes, he would play Robert Thomas, Buchnevich, and Kyrou a whole lot. So
and especially in games when the bottom six was struggling, which St. Louis had a bottom six that is bad, and Montreal has a bottom six that is bad. And Toronto has a bottom. At least they bought a fourth line that is bad. The third line, we'll see how it goes. The fourth line is going to suck ass.
Oh,
they're going to be stapled to the bench by the middle of the second period. So, so they are going to get their minutes.
Yeah. Matthews night. Hate to see it. New York Rangers, the 3.2 total heading into Pittsburgh. The Penguins have a 2.8 total. Brian Rust is out. Erik Karlsson expected to play. What that does, I don't know. Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere at 17-9. I'm an idiot. I can't do math. I thought it was 16-9, but that was a line that was in the 21s for a lot of the season last year. Kreider, Zibanejad, Riley, Smith, and then the Rangers' third line of Hedel, Kakko, and Cooley. Cooley's not in the player pool, even though he was on the Rangers all of last season. Good stuff. Pittsburgh going with Crosby, Drew O'Connor, Anthony Beauvillier, and then Malkin, Bunting, Raquel. Third line of Eller, Puljujarvi, and Rutger McGrody. We were discussing this game a little bit before the show because we're just trying to figure out who Pittsburgh is going to think is the Rangers' top line, because most places have the Rangers' top line listed as Kreider, Zibanejad, Riley, Smith. But with anyone who's ever watched the Rangers knows that it's really Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere. They were one of the best 5-on-5 lines in the league last year. Now, with Crosby being with Drew O'Connor and Anthony Beauvillier, I don't think they're going to be hard matching. That was kind of the consensus from Cliffy as well. It's just going to be a mix-up of whoever is rested and ready to go against Panarin. Cliffy did note that because they have a rookie on the third line, probably won't see much of Panarin there, so it's probably going to be top six mixed against top six. I like the Rangers' second line here. We'll call them the Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere line, even though I know they're the top line. They're actually the top line in the top stacks tool because Jake is the man. You get Panarin and Trocheck on the top power play unit. Lafreniere had a breakout season. He had a breakout playoffs. He's not on the top power play, but I would imagine the Rangers' second power play unit sees a little bit more time than they did last year because that is a pretty decent unit as well. it doesn't really matter. Like the Malkin, Bunting, Raquel line has a pretty decent sample of being decent defensively, but I cannot imagine a line with Anthony Beauvillier and Drew O'Connor being good defensively. Their penalty kill was good last year. Or I'm making things up. No, they were pretty good last year, weren't they?
Which
or they're
penalty
bad?
kill?
I don't know, but either way, Rangers.
The Pittsburgh penalty kill?
Yeah.
Had it right here. Yeah, they were fine. They were
borderline
top 10 by goals against per minute.
Yeah. But yeah, Rangers power play when it's rolling can beat anybody. But Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere 5-on-5, really, really good. You want to fire up Riley Smith because he's back in Pittsburgh? Sure, go for it. Rangers second line is what I'm interested in there. On the Pittsburgh side, it gets a little bit more interesting because both those top lines are really, really cheap. The issue is Malkin, Bunting, Raquel coming in with negative leverage. And normally that would be fine at 12-9 for me. But again, like pricing is not a massive issue here. The one spot where you can beat Igor and where he struggled last year was on the penalty kill. Now the Pittsburgh power play is a disaster. So I don't think I would be full stacking anything. I think I would take a Malkin Bunting or like a Malkin Raquel, something like that. A Crosby one-off is fine. But for me, if I'm going to full stack anything from this game, it's going to be Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere.
Yeah. We said earlier what a surprise it was that Ilya Mikheyev was kicked off the Chicago top line basically before half the very first game of the regular season was over. I feel kind of the same way with the Pittsburgh top line. Like if Pittsburgh is down 2-0 in the second period, I really don't think that Beauvillier, Crosby, and O'Connor is going to stay together as a line. Like that's kind of the issue. Even if it's like a 0-0 game midway through the second, I think you're going to see guys get moved around a little bit because they're basically just doing this because they're trying to tread water until Brian Rust comes back. So they're hoping this works. I'm not so sure it will. I think Crosby and O'Connor is fine. Beauvillier, like, I don't really have a lot of faith in him. He really hasn't. He had like one decent season with the Islanders and then like 5 bad years in a row. Like eventually he kind of just is what he is. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we get halfway through the game and McGroarty's on the top line or even Puljujärvi's on the top line or something like that. Like I don't mind if you want to one off O'Connor or something like that. I don't know if I would stack Pittsburgh 1. Pittsburgh 2, there is negative leverage there. The one thing that worries me is that without Rust, they're running a 2 defense top power play unit. The
power play is bad enough as it is.
It's just they tried it last year and it didn't work. They're doing it again this year because they don't want to put McGroarty or Puljujärvi or whomever on the top power play until Rust comes back. That feels like something else that is going to last one game and then they're going to go 0 for 3 on the power play and then break it up in the next practice. So that's kind of the issue that I would have with stacking the second line is like, you really want that power play upside. I'm not sure that they have it, but like Bunting, Raquel, and Malkin, like at least Malkin and Raquel were really good offensively last year. 455 minutes together, 32 shots, 3.6 goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. And then when Bunting joined the line later in the year, they were still really, really good. That is a second line. Like that's a second line where if they do go out against Zibanejad or whatever, like they can probably have a decent run of the play. So honestly, even though they're the negatively leveraged line here, 10.4% ownership, 4.3 top 2 stack, I don't mind that Pittsburgh 2 line. I think I'd prefer it over Pittsburgh 1. Like I have more confidence Pittsburgh 2 is going to start and finish the game together than I do Pittsburgh 1, and by quite a bit. Pittsburgh 3 is what's kind of interesting to me, honestly, because we do have a super expensive Edmonton and a super expensive Colorado top line on the slate tonight. Eller, Puljujärvi, McGroarty. Like Eller, he's not a good offensive player, but he's still really good defensively. He's kind of like a diet Jordan Staal, if you want to put it that way. McGroarty, he's a good rookie. Like this isn't just some guy that they need to fill in on the third line. Like he was a fairly highly touted prospect, and he's a guy that can both finish plays and is a good playmaker. which is something that I think that line would need because Puljujarvi on the other side is more of a guy that would drive to the net, clean up rebounds, that type of thing. And Puljujarvi, like I only watched one Pittsburgh preseason game, but he looked great in the preseason game I did watch. He had 8 points in 4 games. Like even in preseason, like that's kind of unreal. And when Puljujarvi was at his best, he would have 82 game paces of like 20 goals, 20 assists, 160, 170 shots for over 82 games. Like that's a useful player, especially considering he's min-priced here tonight. So if you want to do like a two-man and McGroarty, Puljujarvi, Eller, McGroarty, like something like that, because you want to fit in an Edmonton power play stack or a Colorado power play stack, I'm putting them in the same bin as Toronto 3. Like I don't mind taking 2 of the 3 off the line if you have a super expensive stack elsewhere, but it's Pitt 2 that I like the best. On the Rangers side, I think the Zibanejad Kreider line will be a lot better this year with Riley Smith there. Like call me a Riley Smith slappy. Riley Smith is one of those guys, like he doesn't do anything great, but he does a lot of things good or well. He's not a great shooter, but he's a good shooter. He's not a great passer, but he's a good passer. He is good in transition, not great in transition. That's basically all that top line needs. They don't need a superstar on the right wing. They just need somebody that can finish the play or start the play, which is something that they haven't had since Pavel Buchnevich got traded, other than the 20 games that Blake Wheeler played with them or whatever. That's been the only time they've had it. And I think Riley Smith can be that for him. I don't mind that Rangers line. Like I really don't. They're coming in with a little bit of negative leverage, 8% against 6.9% top 2 stack. I think that's fine. Zibanejad only had 29 goals last year and was entirely a shooting percentage drop at 5-on-5. Like he shot like 6% or something like that at 5-on-5, which is just obscene. Like he's not going to repeat that again. Like I think we should assume Zibanejad is going to be a 30 to 35 goal scorer again this season. So I don't mind that Rangers line. But that Lafreniere, Trocheck, Panarin line is just too cheap. Like you said, this is a line that was over 20K for months on end last year, and they're under 18K here. Like that's kind of the problem. They're within $2,600 of the Kreider line. They are a lot better. I don't know if they're like going to put up 4.4 goals per 60 at 5-on-5 again or something like that, which is like absolutely obscene. Like that's Connor McDavid numbers. But I do think that they can be one of the top 5-on-5 lines in the league. Like Lafreniere made legit leaps last year. It wasn't just being carried by Panarin and Trocheck. Like he was doing the zone entries. He was looking for passes, like trying to make plays. He was great around the net and down low, along with Vinny Trocheck, so that they could, find Panarin in open spaces and stuff like that. Like he did grow a lot. I do like both Rangers' top 2 lines. Honestly, I think I would probably lead the Kreider line just because they're coming in with lower ownership. But there's no defensive concern for me on the Pittsburgh side. Like I'm not worried about their first or second or third line or whatever. Like their third line is probably going to be their best defensive line, or maybe their only good defensive line. So I would lean Kreider, Zibanejad, and Riley Smith. But if you want, no problem playing Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere. Like I think it's pretty much just 1A, 1B for me. Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere is the better line, but I think considering the $2,600 savings and 50% less ownership, I do think there is merit to playing this Zibanejad line.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch the Rangers in the playoffs last year, outside of Trocheck, Lafreniere was by far their best forward. That's way too long on the Rangers, Bobby. How your Kings going to be doing? They're going to be a lottery team, homie.
Ooh, that's tough.
Winnipeg Jets with a 2.7 total heading into Edmonton. The Oilers have a 3.3 total. Connor Hellebuyck is in net. He was away for the team for a couple days for undisclosed reasons. He's back. He's starting. Exhale. Winnipeg going Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Gabriel Velarde. That was a struggle getting out. Then Nikolai Ehlers, Cole Perfidi, Vladislav Nemestikov. The third line, Lowry, Niederreiter, Appleton. Edmonton going McDavid, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Skinner, and then Henrique, Matthias Janmark, Connor Brown. Edmonton 1, too cheap. They're 22-2, and you're like, well, that's too cheap. They were like 25 and change last year. Couple of things. There's a heavy positive leverage on Edmonton one here tonight. Now, I know we don't like stacking against Hellebuck. There are a couple reasons why I think it's viable tonight. One, Connor, Scheifele, Velarde have a fairly large sample of being atrocious defensively. It's about a 200-minute sample, and it's bad. It was so bad that they took Kyle Connor off the top line for a good stretch of the season. If they just swap Connor and Ehlers, they would have a much better top six defensively. It's not surprising that the associate coach of Rick Bowness is making the same mistake. Had to get that off my chest. I do really like McDavid, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins. Also, the second reason that I like Edmonton top line is, yes, the Winnipeg penalty kill improved last year. But yes, the improvement was only to like the middle of the pack, not just like atrocious. And Edmonton's power play is absolutely disgusting. So I'm very much in on Edmonton 1 here. Edmonton 2, it's a weird assortment of guys who have lots of talent. Whether they mesh together remains to be seen. There's no sample on them. I think they're going to be fine offensively. Like, they're going to be good. They're 3 really good offensive players. They'll find a way to make it work offensively. Defensively, that's going to be a whole nother story. Now, Leon Draisaitl is the only one on the power play, one on that line. I think you can stack Edmonton 2 if you want. I do worry that Nemestikov, Perfidi, Ehlers is a lot better defensively than Connor, Scheifele, Velarde. So, and it also is kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face, stacking Edmonton without McDavid in a good power play spot. So I'm very much in on Edmonton 1, Edmonton power play. On the flip side, there is some fairly low ownership on Winnipeg as well. You want to stack that top line at 16-9? Sure, go ahead. They're fully correlated on the power play. Edmonton does have a good penalty kill. They have a good goalie. And as Cliffy mentioned to me before the show, he'll give you the exact number if I mess it up, which is a high probability that I will. But the pairing of Bouchard and Ekholm go out about 55% of the time with McDavid went at 5-on-5. So that top line for Winnipeg is going to see a lot of that top pair. Now, once you get past that top pair, it's a mess. And Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Skinner, not going to be good defensively. I do have some interest in Winnipeg too here. You don't have to full stack. Like Vladislav Nemestikov is the new Yori Laterra for DFS. He's just kind of there. I think a 2-man of Ehlers, Perfidi is perfectly fine at their price. Now, will Scott Arniel play them 13 minutes like Bonus did? We'll find out. But at that price, I'm willing to take some chances because Edmonton 2 is going to be bad defensively. Your second pair is Travis Dermott and Brett Kulak, or Nurse and some guy. So, like, I'll take some chances here with Ehlers and Perfidi, but I really do like Edmonton 1 here.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the ice time for Winnipeg because I know we have Winnipeg 2 designated as Ehlers, Perfidi, and Nemestikov. If you look at even strength time last year, amongst forwards for Winnipeg that played at least 20 games last season, Mason Appleton was 3rd, Adam Lowry was 6th, and Nino Niederreiter was 7th in ice time. So that Lowry, Niederreiter, Appleton line is the second line. They're not going to get a ton more ice time than Perfidi and company, but I do think it's something where like that Lowry line maybe plays like 14 minutes and then the Perfidi line plays like 13 minutes. The difference for Ehlers will be that he's on the top power play unit, so he can earn like an extra 3 to 4 minutes a game or whatever it is. That's the problem that I have with that Winnipeg second line is like they're going to be treated as the third line. Like they just are like Cole Perfidi was a healthy scratch for like 75% of the last month of the season and then the first 5 games of playoffs. Like, this is not a coaching staff that likes this player. And, Nikolai Ehlers had, I think it was like a 7 or 8 year low in ice time last year. Part of that was, I think, injury related, but that's why I worry about Winnipeg too, because Ehlers and Perfidi, nearly 300 minutes together last season at 5-on-5, 32 shots for, 25 against per 60 minutes. Like, they outplayed the opposition. 3 goals per 60 minutes as well. Perfidi's primary points, which is goals and first assists per 60 minutes, was in a similar range as Mikko Rantanen and Alex DeBrincat. It's the problem is he's going to play 12 to 13 minutes at even strength. Like, that's kind of the issue. It's like, these guys are really good offensively. I do worry about their ice time. I think it's a pretty good matchup because I agree with you. Draisaitl, Arvidsson, and Skinner's not going to be a good defensive line. And you mentioned Bouchard and Ekholm. I think Bouchard was like 58% of his ice time came with McDavid at 5-on-5, and with Ekholm it was 55% or something like that. So yeah, like 55% of the time that pairing's on the ice with McDavid. So when they're off, it's going to be Edmonton depth defenseman with that Edmonton second line, and that's why I think Ehlers, Perfidi, and Mesnov can kind of get it done. 1.5% top 2 stack, 3.9% ownership. I just worry about ice time. I'd be more comfortable one-offing Ehlers, certainly. I think he's obviously, because of his top power play status, one-offing even Perfidi, I think is fine. I like full stacking is kind of tough for me. The Winnipeg top line, you know how I said Perfidi and Ehlers were on the ice for 25 shots against per 60 minutes last year? The Winnipeg top line was on the ice for 35 shots against per 60 minutes last year. 40% more shots allowed than the guy that this team benched for the last month of the season. Like, that line sucks defensively. I do wonder how much of it was Kyle Connor being injured. He injured his knee, I think, like 2 months into the season. He was out for like a month. How good he was after that, like, I think it's up for debate. Here's the thing. Over the last 3 years with Scheifele and Connor on the ice, Winnipeg allows 3.2 goals against per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. With them off the ice, it's 1.8. Okay. Like, they are awful defensively. The penalty kill really did struggle at times last year as well. Like, Edmonton 1, I think, is my favorite line on the slate here tonight. McDavid, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, 4.4 goals per 60 minutes last year, at 5-on-5, about the same year before, all on the top power play. And the power play has been the best power play in the league over the last 2 years, and by quite a bit. Maybe Hyman's shooting percentage drops, but I would bet that McDavid's shooting percentage also rises commensurately. You know what I mean? Like, this is not a line that's going to go out and score 2.7 goals per 60. They are elite. I think they're in a great matchup against Edmonton 1 or against Winnipeg 1. I'm with you. I don't really like stacking against Hellebuck. If there's a line that I would stack against Hellebuck, it is this Edmonton top line in what is a pretty good 5-on-5 matchup. So I do like Edmonton 1. Edmonton 2, I think they're certainly in play, especially because they have positive leverage. I think Winnipeg's penalty kill can get better, is the kind of thing. So, like, if the Edmonton power play doesn't go 2 for 4 or 2 for 5 or something like that, then yeah, Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Skinner can be the best line for the Oilers in this game. But I really do like Edmonton 1. So for me, Edmonton 1, I think Winnipeg 1 is fine to play just because they are perfectly correlated. They are coming in with positive leverage. They are very reasonably priced at $16,900. But if you're asking me to, even factoring in the difference in price and difference in ownership and all that, which line do I want to play out of this game? It's Edmonton 1, and it's not particularly close.
Yeah, and you saw I know it's unfair to say in the playoffs, but Colorado 1 was matched up at home against that Scheifele line, and they ran them over. It was disgusting. And if there's a comparable to the McDavid line, it's probably the McKinnon line. So they ran them over. Yeah,
and McKinnon didn't score against Winnipeg last year, but he had 5 assists in 3 games. They can definitely put up points against this team, even with Hellebuck in that.
let's move on to the Pilot Lights, the Calgary Pilot Lights, with a 2.8 total heading into Vancouver. The Canucks have a 3.6 total, second highest on the slate behind Toronto. Dan Vladar in net for the Flames tonight. Every time I see him starting, all I can think about is Cliffy going, the biggest drop off from starter to backup all season was Markstrom to Vladar. And yeah, Markstrom is a very good goalie, but so are most starting NHL goalies. And it was still a massive drop off. And he's just not good. He's the Jonas Johansson of Dan Vladar's.
To put it into this perspective, over the last 3 years, the only regular goalie in the NHL, I think the sample was 51 goalies, so starters and half the backups. The only regular goalie in the NHL who was worse by goals saved above expected every 60 minutes than Dan Vladar was Jack Campbell. And Jack Campbell lost his, I think he's in the NHL Player Assistance Program right now. He lost his NHL job 2 years ago. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like Vladar with Campbell not on any roster right now, there's a good argument that Vladar is the worst goalie in the NHL.
Yeah. In a league where there is a who's the Tampa backup? I just mentioned his name. Jonas Johansson, who Tim Vogel flag planted as the worst goalie in the NHL, which is still one of my favorite tweets of all time. But anyway, let's get to this game here. New faces in new places. Vancouver rolling out JT Miller, Brock Besser, Danton Heinen. I'm a Heinen slappy. I know you are too. You put him up on a pedestal for Boston last year. I think he will find a home on that line. Elias Pettersson with Jake DeBrusk and Daniel Sprong. Calgary going with Kadri, Kuzmenko, Samuel Hanzik, Blake Holman, Mikael Backlund, Connor Zary, Huberdeau, Pospisil, and Mantha. That just screams bad. You know what I mean? Like Backlund, Coleman, Zary, maybe, but like Zary and Coleman have a sample from last year, and it's pretty bad. Like this team going up into Vancouver. Vancouver legitimately has an elite top six. No one wants to play the Miller-Besser line. Like 7.6% projected ownership for a line at 17-1. You get Miller and Besser on the top power play unit. Most of the ownership here is going to Pettersson, DeBrusk, Sprong. It's nice to see Pettersson have some line mates, but at almost 19% projected ownership, I'll gravitate towards the Vancouver top line, quote unquote. Either is fine. Power play stacking is fine. On the Calgary side, like it is Silvos, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, in net. The thing is, like in Vancouver is not a good place to play. Like you don't expect that, but last year Miller-Besser was legitimately one of the best shutdown lines in the NHL, which is insane to come out of my mouth, but it's true. Like they were just disgusting defensively. I don't know if I'll have any Flames, especially in single entry. I'm not. In MME, yeah, I'll take some shots on Kadri Kuzmenko. Maybe I'll have like a Backlund Coleman. I don't know. Like it's just bad. Like I don't want to full stack anything. I think Kadri's always in play. He had a great season last year playing with, my dogs as their wingers. You know what I mean? So like I'm fine with Kadri. It's just a miserable matchup, even if they were fully healthy. Going into Vancouver is not a fun time. So this is a Vancouver game for me.
Yeah. I'll say I'm out on Kadri Kuzmenko Hanzik because, as you mentioned, that Miller-Besser line was elite defensively last year. I think part of it, too, was that, like we said, Bouchard and Ekholm went out a lot with McDavid. When Vancouver's at home, they put out Quinn Hughes and Hronik a lot with the JT Miller line, and it's just a brutal matchup. So I'm out on Kadri Kuzmenko Hanzik. Coleman, Backlund, Zary, I do think they're going to be good defensively. I think they're going to suck offensively. Like Coleman had his career year last year. He is a very inefficient shooter. Michael Backlund is also a very inefficient shooter. Connor Zary, I think he was decent for a rookie, but I think playing with Pospisil and Kadri, honestly, for what, 2/3 of the season, helped his numbers look a lot better than what they actually were. Like I kind of drank the Connor Zary juice last year after breaking the team down a little bit in the offseason. I was like, no, that was more Kadri and Pospisil. So I'm not in on Calgary 2. Calgary 3 is honestly the one line that interests me on that side, because I don't think they see much of Hughes and Hronik. And Pospisil was legitimately good last year. Like, I know people like to get caught up in his suspensions and him kind of acting like an idiot on the ice. He's a legitimately good player, and him and Huberdeau in a limited sample last year, 76 shot attempts per 60 minutes, only 80 minutes together, but they shot under 4%, which was kind of the problem. Like, if Huberdeau can even be 75% of the playmaker he was a couple years ago with Pospisil, who's, I think, an underrated kind of budding two-way player. Mantha, who honestly wasn't that bad last year. He's just a guy that it's been 3 or 4 years since he's gotten meaningful minutes. I think like a two-man of like Pospisil Mantha or like Pospisil Huberdeau, again, if you're stacking Edmonton, if you're stacking Colorado or something like that, I think they're definitely in play, but that's all that interests me on the Calgary side. On the Vancouver side, I think there's too much ownership on that Pettersson line with a couple unknowns. Like, we don't really know how well him and DeBrusk and Sprong are going to fit in together, right? And Lekkerimaki played quite a bit during the preseason. So, how much chemistry is there? All that. Like, I think I'd be more in on Miller, Besser, and Heinen, especially where they're not coming in with that much ownership. 7.6% against 9.6% top 2 stack percentage. Like, if you want to just take Heinen off and put in Pettersson or put in DeBrusk and make it a power play stack, I think that's perfectly fine. But it is the Miller line that I like best in this game. And then the Pettersson line, I think like a two-man from Calgary 3 is playable if you're playing like Edmonton, Colorado, that type of stuff.
Yeah. Calgary's going to be back this year.
Not going to be even great, especially not with Vladar in that.
Yeah. I mean, arguably their best winger is hurt, like Sharon Govich. But even when he comes back, it's going to be a long season for the Pilot Lights.
Yeah, and I just want to make one point about Pospisil. Like, I was looking at some of his like micro stats. There's something called scoring chance contributions, which is individual scoring chances, and then an assist that you make on a teammate's chance. He was over 1 standard deviation above the league average last year, which means he was basically creating scoring chances for himself or teammates at a first line rate. It's only 1 rookie season. It's not a huge sample, et cetera, but he was really good. That's why I kind of like Calgary 3 here tonight.
Yeah. It's just like Huberdeau is just not great for DFS, but
no.
He still has, who knows? We'll find out. Last time we trashed Huberdeau, he was optimal, so I'm going to shut up my mouth. Colorado Avalanche with a 3.2 total heading into Sin City. The Golden Knights have a 3.2 total as well. Man, oh man, are the Avs banged up. But like, they've played so much hockey the past 2 seasons. Gabriel Landeskog went on long-term IR. He hasn't played in 2 seasons. Like, I am not going to believe he's ever coming back until I see it. Nishushkin should be back, they said, as early as November. Arturi Lekkonen's hurt. They're a little bit of a mess here. The top line still intact. McKinnon, Ranton, and Duran. And while I like them, how much can they sustain playing their 24, 25 minutes a night before they run out of gas? You know what I mean? Like, their second line is Casey Middlestat, Callum Ritchie, and some Russian guy that I don't have in front of me because he's not in the player pool, Kalya Kovov or something.
Nikolai Kovalenko.
Nikolai Kovalenko. You think that line is going to be pretty good defensively, and I'll let you touch on that when you get there. But it's offensively, maybe you'll get some offense out of Colton Wood and O'Connor, that third line, coming in with pretty high negative leverage, and that doesn't really interest me. But that line's going to have to step up offensively. That top line's going to be doing some serious heavy lifting. Now, tonight is interesting because last season Vegas' penalty kill was terrible. They lost Alec Martinez. They did get Hannafin. Pietrangelo is healthy. Theodore's back. Theodore's not a penalty killer, though. So, and Colorado has a very good top power play. Now, they're missing Nichushkin, Landeskog, Lehkonen, so it's going to be McKinnon, Rant, and Drouin, and then Middlestat and Makar. Now, Middlestat is no slouch, so he'll fit in. They're great. That top line for Colorado, 22-2. They're going to get Eichel, Stone, and either Barbashev or Victor Olofsson. Like, Eichel, Stone, they have good numbers. It's just a matter of if they're healthy or not. It doesn't really matter here tonight. Like, McKinnon, Ranton, and Drouin are going to play 20-plus minutes easily. 28.9% top two stack, 10% projected ownership. I prefer Edmonton to them. That's just my personal opinion. I think I also like Toronto a little bit better than them. Just one, Edmonton's home. Toronto has a very, very, very good matchup. Vegas is a playoff team. Unfortunately, Montreal is just a fun team. We need Montreal better. When the top six is humming, hockey is great, but I'm in on Colorado.
It's going to take a couple years.
Yeah, but, it's game one. They can handle 25 minutes. Yeah, no, I agree. But, like, I'm 38 and get winded walking up the stairs, so eventually they're going to get tired. But from tonight, they're definitely fine. It's a good spot. If I had to rank my top three, I think I'd go Edmonton 1, Toronto 1, then Colorado 1. But, like, how much is separating them? Not much. The Colorado depth I'm out on. One off Middlestat's fine. Vegas is interesting, right? Because if it is Victor Olofsson on that top line, say what you will about Victor Olofsson. And I said a lot of things about Victor Olofsson before the show. Bless you. He is min price, and he is on the top power play. Now, without all these guys on Colorado, their penalty kill is going to be a little bit suspect. I like Georgiev. Don't get me wrong. But there's a reason the Rangers traded him, right? Like, he is not a top-tier NHL goalie. Bless you. And I do like the Vegas power play here tonight. Eichel, Stone, for sure, going to be on that top line on power play 1. I think you can add in Victor Olofsson there. He's min price if you need to fit somebody. Hurdles on the power play. That second line for Vegas, Hurdle, Dorofeyev, Holtz, I like in a nutshell. Cliffy kind of talked me off of them, and I'll let him explain why. So I'm in on both top lines here.
Yeah, I do like Colorado 1. Don't get me wrong. I think I'm kind of at the point with you where, like, all things being equal, do I want to play Colorado 1? Do I want to play Colorado 1 on the road in Vegas, or do I want to play Toronto 1 on the road in Montreal? Like, that's just kind of the way I look at it. Like, by top two stack percentage, those three lines are all between 23 and 29%. Like, there is a difference, but they're all relatively bunched up, and Toronto's like $3,000 cheaper than the others. So, like, they're all basically pretty similar. I would say Toronto just for the $3,000 savings, and that I think that they're better than they're getting a little bit of credit for, but probably Toronto or Edmonton. The thing with Colorado, like, Vegas, one issue with playing in Vegas is Vegas doesn't take, at least last year, they didn't really take any penalties at all.
Victor Olofsson may change that a little bit.
We'll see. But by time shorthanded per game last season, Vegas gave up the fewest power plays to the opponent. And they also gave up the fewest power plays to the opponent the year before that. This is 2 years in a row now. Vegas has given up the fewest power plays per game of any team in the league. That's an issue, especially when you consider Vegas's defense has typically been pretty good. I know things have changed a little bit. They've had some players leave over the last couple of years, but, like, I still think Vegas's defense is still fairly solid. Like, I think, Braden McNabb is underrated. Nick Hague is a little bit underrated. Bringing in Hannafin is obviously going to help a lot. So I think of the big three lines on the slate tonight, Colorado is my number 3. Colorado 2, I was telling you before the game, like, Callum Ritchie is a legit prospect. Like, one of those guys that can probably turn into a Casey Middlestat. Honestly, that, if he's put in the right spot, can put up like 20 goals, 50 assists or something like that, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Whether he's there right now, I guess we'll see. Nikolai Kovalenko, obviously, also a legit prospect, more of a physical presence, but he's not just a guy that crashes and bangs. Like, he is an actually good playmaker. And like I was telling you before the show, injuries or not, if Colorado didn't think that Kovalenko and Callum Ritchie could play on the second line with Casey Middlestat, they wouldn't be there. They would go out and they would sign somebody, maybe not somebody like Victor Olofsson, but they would go out and sign a couple veterans for the league minimum and stick them on the second line until they got healthy. They wanted to give these guys an opportunity, and these guys earned their spot. Whether they can actually stay in the NHL on the second line for 6 months, I think, is a different story. But they're not just there because of injuries to other players. So they're interesting. Obviously, you can't stack them. Kovalenko's not the player pool. I do wonder if Colorado 3 doesn't actually end up their second line. You know what I mean? Because Colton Wood and O'Connor was really good last year. 36 shots for, 28 against per 60 minutes, 2.8 goals per 60. They have trouble finishing. Ross Colton does like to shoot. Miles Wood certainly does like to shoot as well. Don't mind one-offing any of those guys. But for me, I think if I'm just full stacking line, it's Colorado 1 or bust. On the Vegas side, Vegas 1 is the only line that I have interest in. Vegas 2, like, I'm an Alex Holtz guy. It worries me that New Jersey was so kind of willing to get rid of him, even after a 21-goal season. He didn't really do a lot except have a spike in shooting percentage. That is a concern. I'm not sure that line actually stays together. I don't wonder if they, move up Ivan Barbashev a line, or if they don't move up. Like, Brett Howden's played top 6 in very recent history for Vegas. He was in the top 6 when they won the Stanley Cup. I do kind of worry about that. I think Eichel and Stone are going to stay together because they need to until this team gets a little bit healthier up front and they know what they have. So Eichel, Stone, and Olofsson perfectly correlated on the power play. I'm not worried about the Avs from a defensive perspective. The Avs certainly took more penalties than Vegas did last year. Not a lot, but, about middle of the league. So, Vegas can get there on the power play. I do like Eichel, Stone. Like, if you're not stacking any one of the big lines, like if you do want to do a couple mid-tier stacks, like a Montreal one, a Vancouver Besser stack or Besser Miller stack, like something like that, I do think putting Vegas 1 with them is more than acceptable. They're the only line that I really like, that I'd really stack from that side. So for me, it's either the top lines or maybe some one-offs. There are no depth lines I'm stacking here.
No, we're a little short for time, but I'm not sure the New Jersey front office has the eye for talent. They traded Sharon Govich. They refused to trade Dawson Mercer for Timo Meyer. And they were quick to get rid of Holtz. I think Holtz will find a nice scenario there and hopefully have a good season. But let's talk a little bit about defensemen. Anytime I can rag on the Devils, I will. Their fair weather fans are out in force. Top of the board, Cale Makar, 8,200, then Adam Fox at 7,100, Quinn Hughes, 6,600, Evan Bouchard, 6,500. Now, I can make a case for all of them. I think I would go Makar 1, Makar 1, Bouchard 2, Fox 3, Quinn Hughes 4. The issue I have with Quinn Hughes is his peripherals. He obviously is an elite player. He just isn't the best for DFS. Weegar is going to play a massive amount of minutes. We were talking about it on one of our best puck shows. Who on the blue line is going to play minutes besides him and Rasmus Anderson? You know what I mean? They're going to get a ton of minutes. I think Matheson's in play. Morgan Riley, Shea Theodore. Unlike last night, I think there is a lot more spend-up options that I like more than the mid-range. What do you see?
Yeah, I think Bouchard is my favorite. Like, Makar is projecting slightly higher. than Bouchard on stochastic projections, but there is a $1,700 difference, and I really do like Bouchard in this matchup. Makar, he's always playable. I'm not going to say don't play him. He's playable every time he steps on the ice. It doesn't matter the matchup. I do like Mackenzie Weegar because I'm with you. I think he's going to play 24 plus minutes. He had over 200 shots and over 200 blocks last season, and it was the second time in 3 years he cracked 200 shots. Now, he shot like 9%, which is why he had 20 goals or whatever. He's not going to shoot 9% again, but he also didn't play the top power play unit for most of the season last year. Like the first 50 games, it was Anderson or Hanifin. Mostly Anderson. And then when Danil Miromanov came in the Hanifin trade, Miromanov played a lot of top power play time. So like Weegar getting top power play minutes, maybe he scores 12 to 15 goals or 12 to 13 goals, something like that, rather than 20. But I think instead of having 32 assists, he's going to end up with like 40 to 45 or something like that. And he can put up a ton of peripherals. I do like Weegar in this matchup as well. Mid-price range, I think, in that 4 to 6K range, Morgan Riley's at the top with a bullet in that matchup. Alex Pietrangelo, Shea Theodore are both fine. I think it would depend on my build. Like, I'd be more inclined to one-off Pietrangelo, like if I just had the cap space. If I was building with Vegas 1, I think throwing Theodore in for power play correlation is just fine. I don't mind Matthias Ekholm either. He gets a lot of minutes. And a lot of minutes with Connor McDavid, as we were saying earlier. Cheap guys, Tyler Myers, I hate to say it, but the guy blocks pucks. What do you want me to say? He's not that expensive. Philip Hronik, I think, is in play for Vancouver as well. Braden Schneider's kind of interesting for me from the Rangers because he can bring some peripherals. And with Ryan Lindgren out, I don't wonder if Schneider gets a reasonable minutes bump here tonight. So don't mind Schneider. I imagine a lot of people are going to be playing Lane Hudson. I'm intrigued at 2,800, especially against a least penalty kill. That was really the least penalty kill was as bad as Montreal's last year. He's on the second power play unit though. So that kind of hurts. I wonder how many minutes he plays, but I don't hate the idea of playing Lane Hudson. He's just not one of the cheap guys that I'm particularly targeting here tonight.
Yeah, Mancini is playing with Fox tonight, but he's not in the player pool. That second pair, if it is Miller and Schneider, they should see a fair bit of ice time, and they were some of the better offensive defensemen in the playoffs for the Rangers. Hopefully that carries over. Let's talk about some goalies. Top of the board, we have Silov. How do you pronounce it?
Shilovs.
Shilovs. That just, I had a story. We're gonna tell it. Igor Shesterkin, Stellars, Skinner at the top of the board. Igor is fine. The Deposit Prospect said he was going to play him just to spite me. But no, 8,100, I think this is a winnable game for the Rangers. Skinner interests me. Skinner's one of my guys, but at 7,900, I think that is a good price. Aiden Hill at 7,600 should see some volume. If you want to ride the Lightning, Connor Hellebuck at 7,500, he is the best goalie in the NHL. At least last year he was. That's fine. I honestly, if I'm spending down, it's probably going to be for Montembeault.
I'm glad you have faith in Montembeault in this matchup because I'm kind of concerned about it.
The Habs always play the Leafs tough.
It's true, but tough also means 5-4 games. You know what I mean? I don't, and the Habs might not generate 30 shots like that. That's Toronto might generate 30 shots, but they'll probably score 4 or 5 goals. That's kind of the issue. I do have Igor at the top. Igor is also at the top of projections as well. So yes, I certainly do love Shesterkin here tonight. Shilovs is second in projections. I think that's fine. He's also probably going to be the highest owned goalie here tonight. And when you have, I know it's a great matchup. Don't get me wrong. That's perfectly fine. But when you have a goalie with 9 career regular season starts as the highest owned goalie on a slate, even if it's only 5 games, that kind of worries me a little bit.
Vancouver's also a shot suppression machine at home.
Yeah, like I'm not concerned about Calgary putting up like 5 goals in 33 shots or something like that. My concern is that Calgary scores like 3 goals on 19 shots or something.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I think it's just Shesterkin for me. I don't mind Stewie Skinner. I think I'd rather kind of chance it with Aiden Hill, but I think it's Igor or Skinner for me. And then Aiden Hill. I think Georgiev is playable. Don't get me wrong. I don't really hate the idea of playing Georgiev, but honestly, if I have 7,800, I'm just going to pay an extra $100 to play Stuart Skinner at home.
Yeah, for sure. Before we get our hat trick pick, just wanted to remind you guys again, this is the last day to get 5 days of the Stochastic NHL Premium for $1. Just click the link in the chat. You can sign up for weekly or monthly, $5 or 5 days for $1. Check it out. It's expiring tonight. I don't know what else to tell you then. Who are you looking for your hat trick pick?
I'm going to do this because I do enjoy Boston Bruins fans being in intense physical and emotional pain. Jake DeBrusk, the day after the Bruins get absolutely embarrassed on the road in Florida, Jake DeBrusk goes out and has a hat trick against Calgary.
I like it. We need some good juju for this player, so I'm going to go Nikolai Ehlers.
Oh, please. Not entirely sold on playing him here tonight in DFS for like season long in best ball. I hope you're right.
Yeah. We'll be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. Eastern in our regular slot. We'll be on Twitter. You know where to find us. If you do sign up for that 5 days for $1, get in that Discord. You can find us there as well. We'll be in there up until lock. After that, I'll probably be tilting my face off. That's usually what I do. I don't have Haas to yell at. I do have Daily Deposit Frostback, though. So we'll see you tomorrow, and good luck, everybody.
Good luck tonight, everyone.